Hi there, my name is Dr. Chris Henstridge. I work at the CCNS at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm very excited to be funded by MND Scotland. I've just recently been awarded a 3-year project grant, and what I'm particularly interested in is trying to figure out what happens between the connections between neurons in the brain of people with MND. So to do that, we work with human post-mortem tissue, and the reason we look at the connections between neurons in the brain is that we know that motor neuron disease, as the name suggests, is a disease of the motor system, and in particular of motor neurons. There are two types of motor neurons. We have upper motor neurons, which are found in the brain, in the motor cortex, and we have lower motor neurons, which are found in the spinal cord, and those cells project out to the muscles and control muscle movement. Now, for these systems to work correctly, there has to be smooth communication between the upper motor neurons and the lower motor neurons. And the point of connection between two neurons is called the synapse. And if these synapses are lost or not working correctly, then the neurons can no longer communicate properly. We believe that there's a disconnection there, which is leading to the inability of people with MND to control muscle movement. So with the post-mortem tissue that we collect from MND patients, we use some really detailed modern imaging techniques to look at individual connections, individual synapses between these neurons to see and to measure the integrity of those, to see if they're still intact and how well anatomically they are connected between each other. As I previously mentioned, motor neuron disease is generally a disease of the motor system, and primarily, of course, it is, but it's now been shown over the last couple of decades that, in fact, almost 50% of people with motor neuron disease also present clinically with some kind of behavioural or cognitive change as well. And what we're trying to do is not just look at the motor system in these people's brains, but also other parts of the brain to see if we can explain why some of these clinical presentations are showing in up to 50% of the cases. And so what we're doing is we're looking at the number of synapses and, again, the integrity of the synapses in not just the motor cortex in the brain, but also different parts of the brain, such as the frontal cortex, which is important for some of these clinical symptoms that the patient present with. So we believe that in people with MND, the loss of these synapses, the loss of these connections between cells may correlate or correspond very closely to the clinical symptoms that these people present with. Now, if we can figure out what's happening to these connections, why they're being lost, where they're being lost, then we hope that we can then discover ways in which we can bring those connections back again. The connections, the synapses, are a really fascinating part of neurobiology, because we know that these synapses can actually increase during certain experiences. So we know that when we learn new tasks, so for example, if you learn how to play the piano, you learn a new language, you're actually forming more and more of these synapses, more and more of these connections. So what we hope to do is figure out why, in people with MND, why these people are losing these connections, and if there's a way that we can then try and bring these connections back and reintroduce brain function and also muscle control.